Hi everyone, so I'm here with Sharon Magrath, and Sharon Magrath is one of the Atlantic ladies rowing team who won awards actually for their amazing feat of endurance, and it was an incredible experience. And we here at Simply Changing were very lucky because we were asked by Sharon to coach the team before they went, which we were very, very happy to do. So we're going to talk about that. Sharon is a practicing midwife, and so we thought, given lockdown and all that's happening with COVID-19, I'd ask her to begin with just to give us an update. So what is life like as a midwife during these current conditions, Sharon?
So yes, you're right. I'm a midwife. My role in midwifery at the moment is not so clinical as it was years ago. So I actually, my role is the name midwife is safeguarding. So I support women via supporting other midwives, if you like. So I support the midwives supporting the women, especially those who are kind of in that more vulnerable group. So in terms of the clinical midwifery, really we've had to sort of reduce the offer that we had to women before, because we were preparing ourselves for just all hands on deck. So, you know, we were preparing, and I was skilling myself up so that I could offer more clinical work. So it feels like within the hospital that we have come through the peak, but a lot of us have been you know, redeployed. I haven't, because safeguarding's remained as much a priority as it was before. But I am kind of on available if I'm required for clinical work. But yeah, on the wards, it's you know, for the women, they don't have their partners with them as much as they did before. We went through a spell where the partners were allowed in the delivery room, but then had to go home because of the risks, and it was difficult for the women. I think it's difficult for us as midwives, but it's difficult for the women. But I think the feedback is that they felt cared for, and you know, everybody in the hospital, it just is going the extra mile, and it's a really kind of, I don't know, it's in a very strange way, there's a real kind of family feel about the whole hospital. You know, everyone is supporting everybody in the best way that they can. So there's a lot of positivity and a lot of thanks as we get, you know, in the community, but in amongst ourselves as really, you know, everyone's kind of supporting one another. So it's been scary, you know, because I'm, and everyone else in the clinical area, you're worried about what you could take home to your family. So you understand the real importance of not, you know, seeing family members, which is tough for everybody. But yeah, so you get it really.
Gosh, wow.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I think being on the front line and then potentially taking the virus into your family home environment must be very difficult. And so what precautions do you put in place? I mean, how do you manage it when you come from, you know, your car to the front door to in the house? How does that work these days for you?
So we obviously take our uniform in a bag. On the entry to the hospital, there's hand gels. So I gel my hands as soon as I get to the hospital, and then there's another one just before I go in the door, and there's one when I get in there. So we're constantly gelling our hands, get changed. If we go into the ward area, then we have to not gown up, but put a mask on. And if we have any areas that with ladies that possibly might have the infection, then I don't tend to go into those areas, but the midwives have to completely gown up and mask up with the visors. So it is, you know, it's just those extra measures wherever you go. So we have areas that are more red where we know there's a risk, and amber and green areas. So my office generally is just kind of green, but as soon as I go out and onto a clinical area, then we have to use the precautions. And the same for the patients, actually, they're very much the same. So yeah, so I mean, I'm not on the high risk units where these patients are being nursed, but obviously it's a lot more strict with the PPE, and I guess they they spend a lot more time on the wards, intensively on the wards, so they don't come out very often.
Yeah.
So it is hard work for them, but yeah, they're coping.
So you have had women who are giving birth that potentially may have COVID-19.
Yeah.
That must be a scary time for those.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, they generally they're showing symptoms, but obviously if they're very poorly, then they would go down to the ITU. But they have to be nursed in a bit of a different way, with more PPE, and separate from the other ladies. So yes, it is scary, but I think, if we're using the precautions, then generally, following those precautions, then everybody should stay as safe as we can keep them, really.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, total respect, Sharon, as always, to you and what you do and your team at the hospital. So we're thinking of you, and Thursday evening you're in my thoughts when we do the clap at 8 o'clock. We actually have an NLP practitioner program running on Thursday evening. It started last week, actually. So what I'm going to do every week is set aside 5 minutes where everyone can just go out and do their thing, and then they come back to the session. So you're always in my thoughts, Sharon.
Thank you.
So Sharon, we're here to talk about the Talisker Rowing Challenge. Can you tell us how you? So basically, what you did, incredibly, what you did was with 2 other women. You got in a very tiny little rowing boat and you rowed across the Atlantic Ocean.
Yes.
And you did that over 60 days. It was 3,000 miles, 60 days.
Yeah.
And in my head, when I think about it, and I think about the progress that you made, if anyone's ever been in a rowing boat on a lake or something, it's quite slow progress, isn't it? And you only make progress by putting the effort into those oars. So we're going to talk about that a lot. What drew you to that challenge?
Well, I knew about the challenge, which I think helped. So I knew when I was asked would I be interested, I knew exactly what the challenge was, because a few years earlier my son had wanted to do it with a friend, and it never really got going because it's quite tough to get the sponsorship, get all the kits. It's just to get to the start line is a massive challenge in itself. So how I got into it was I was busy minding my own business in the gym, and this crazy lady who I'd seen in the gym but never knew her came up to me and said, I've been watching you, because we have heart monitors, and she'd been watching my heart monitor get in the red quite frequently because I work really hard. I did say to her, it could have been because I'm unhealthy, not that I'm healthy. And she said, I've been watching you, she said, and I'm trying to get a team of ladies to row the Atlantic Ocean in the Talisker Whisky Challenge. And I'm looking for ladies over 50 so that we can break a record, be the oldest team of ladies to row the Atlantic. And it was just before a pump class, and I thought it was the weirdest, strangest thing to ask somebody, and it was very surreal. And I didn't know her, but I did know what she was talking about. And I just, throughout the pump session, I was thinking, wow, this would be an amazing challenge. And at the time, I remember, is it possible? Could I do it? All of these kind of thoughts went through my mind. And at the end of the class, I said, yeah, I'm really keen. I know exactly what you mean. I'll have a think about it. And we kept in touch by messenger for a couple of weeks. And I came home to my husband. I said, you know what, I've been asked to row the Atlantic in the Talisker Whisky Atlantic Challenge. And he kind of went, yeah. And he said to me, remember John O'Groats Land's End. And that's all he said. And I thought, oh, my heart dropped, because when we did that challenge, we did it in 7 days. And on day 5, I forget why now, I bonked, completely bonked. It's so important to eat when you're doing these kind of challenges, because you need the energy. And I knew that, but the night before day 5, I just couldn't face eating. I was so tired, and my husband was saying, you must eat. no, I can't face it. Of course, that next day, I got to, the first chunk was about 30 miles because we were cycling about 120, 130 miles a day. And I did the first quarter and I just had no more energy. My body wouldn't do what my mind wanted it to do. And then after that day, I realised that the team that we were in were actually getting in a lot earlier in the day. So we were getting in about 12 o'clock the first 4 days at night, setting off at 9, getting in at 12 o'clock at night. Very little time to eat, nothing was open. And I realised that these guys were getting in about 8 or 9 o'clock. And I thought, gosh, I think I've been slowing them down. But they never said anything. They were so lovely. They were a lovely team. So I chose, and I did make that decision. I thought, right, okay, I'll just do the last quarter. And I was happy with that. But when my husband said to me, remember John O'Groats to Land's End, it was like he was judging me and I'd failed in some way. And I'd never looked at it like that as a failure, but it did sow that seed of doubt. So I went back to Di and I said, well, I don't know now. You know, I'd explained to her what happened. It's really sown this seed of doubt. But I continued to read books and I continued to watch the videos, and it just really captured got my enthusiasm. And I thought, do you know what? I don't know whether I read it somewhere or I heard someone speak, and they said they'd been challenged and somebody had said to them something like, if not you, then who? And if not now, then when? And that really struck a chord with me because I thought, that's me. I can do this. So I went back to my husband and I said, do you know what? I'm going to do this. And he said, fine, kind of. And he really didn't ever believe it was going to happen. And right up until the day that we rode, well, right up until we got to La Gomera and he came to see us in La Gomera, that's when it really hit him that we were going to do this challenge, because I don't think he ever believed, because there were so many hoops to jump through. I can't tell you to get to the start line. I don't think he ever believed we were going to do it. But yeah, so that kind of is how I got into it. I don't know whether that answered your question.
Gosh, yes, it does it, and more.
Yeah.
So, so this, you're talking about Di,
Yeah.
and hopefully we're going to speak to Di as well.
Yeah.
So
Di's the crazy lady. Yes, she doesn't mind me calling her that. We're both crazy ladies, actually, for having done the challenge.
Absolutely, and I think the fact that she was looking at your heart monitor while you were in the gym with an eye for who can I bring into this challenge is an incredible thing, and well done to her for doing that.
Yeah.
So she obviously knew what she was looking for. She knew that she was looking for someone who was physically pushing themselves.
Yeah.
And of course that brings with it a lot of mental discipline too,
Yeah.
without really knowing who you are, Sharon, and what you had achieved.
Yes.
Because you do set yourself challenges, and rise to those challenges.
Yes.
And what would you say is the one that you've enjoyed most in terms of the challenges that you've set yourself?
They're usually physical challenges. I don't usually see work as a challenge, but actually, you know, looking back now, I can see that every now and again I have to kind of set myself, even in work. But in my home life, I think I think the Atlantic has been the best and the most kind of it's got some amazing memories. But also, I mean, I did the London Marathon, and then I did John O'Groats Land's End, and even those I look back with, and I've thoroughly enjoyed training for them, and I've enjoyed every minute of them, and the camaraderie that you get from doing it with another group of people. Oh, we did London to Paris last year. That was amazing. So I just love the training because it keeps me fit, and I love my food. So I know I have to exercise, I just love setting myself a challenge and just trying to achieve it, really. And like I said, I don't think it matters if you don't actually get to the final point, because I never saw myself as failing that John O'Groats to Land's End challenge, and I still don't now. My husband made me, you know, think about it, but no, I've enjoyed all of them. Yeah, and they've never been, you know, like the London Marathon. I would have liked to have done it in a certain time, but it didn't matter. I just wanted to get round. And anyone who's done the London Marathon will know it's amazing. The people come out and they cheer you on, and you've got your name on, and it's just a wonderful atmosphere. So they've all had their special memories. Yeah.
Amazing. And is there London to Paris? Is that a cycle ride?
Yes, we cycled London to Paris. That was something that Ian's always wanted to do. He's the cyclist. He always wanted to do John O'Groats to Land's End. So I was the one who said, oh look, there's this challenge on, do you fancy doing it? And with the John O'Groats Land's End, he said, oh, I'm not sure, I'll do it if you do it. So I did it because he did it. And then after we did the Atlantic, I said, right, come on, we've got to do something that you want to do. And he wanted to do the London Paris, but he wanted to do it when the Tour de France arrived, and so we did it that's leading up to that. So we actually saw the Tour de France come in, which was, again, it's another tick on the bucket list.
Incredible.
Yeah.
And you well coordinated, I have to say. How long did it take to cycle from London to Paris?
4 days.
Right.
Yeah, so we did that with an organised group, and it was very, very well organised. It was about 70 to 80 miles a day. It was in the heat last year. Do you remember when we had that heat wave?
Yes.
Oh my goodness, I really did think I was going to die. It was the first day from here to the ferry. Well, it was London to the ferry. Oh, the heat was incredible. I mean, I just, at one point, we got lost, and then Ian and I got separated. And I was just along this windy road thinking, if I don't find somewhere, I'm going to have to just go and knock on someone's door to get some water, because I'd run out of water. And I ended up finding this pub and getting filling up with squash and getting 2 pints of Coke and Diet Coke. Probably the wrong thing to get, but I just needed to replace electrolytes. I just sat down in the shade and kind of got myself together and nearly missed the ferry, but we got there. And then we had the heat wave. It was so incredibly hot. We were cycling and there was nobody in sight apart from the odd car. So all the French were hiding away, and the roads were just completely clear. We were really crazy. And then on the 3rd day, or the second, I can't remember which day it was so hot that the group, anyone who hadn't made it that day, we were about 60 mile across. They took us all off the road and got us into the coach because it was too dangerous really for us to continue. We got to about 44 or something silly like that. It was very hot.
It was very, very hot. Carrie and I were in Paris airport waiting for some dogs to arrive from South Korea, actually, some dog meat trained survivors on that Saturday, I think it was. But I hadn't appreciated that you were out in the blazing sunshine, cycling 70 to 80 miles a day. Incredible.
Yeah. It's funny because where we did the training for the Atlantic, the summer before we went in the December, we were able to do Ibiza to Barcelona. Is that the right way around? Yes. And that was during a heat wave as well. And again, that was just, oh my goodness, that was crazy hot. Yeah. In the middle of the Mediterranean, and it was really still water, and the sun was just, beating down on us. Yeah.
Oh, incredible. So you had quite some experiences in these challenges that you want to set for yourselves, which is great. So what did the challenge of rowing the Atlantic actually represent to you? Was it up there with all the big challenges, or was it similarly to the others that you've taken on?
I think it's for me, it probably is a once in a lifetime thing. And I look back and I'm just so lucky to have been asked, because there were very few people who have really, at that point, I think they were saying there was more have been into space than had rowed the Atlantic or rowed an ocean. I think that's kind of slightly changing now, but it's one of those things that was beyond what I could even imagine. But I had to, we were constantly kind of telling ourselves that we would do it. So in terms of the challenge, it was the biggest because there were so many things to jump through to get there, whereas some of the other challenges have been big. But it was all the others, the stuff that went along with it, getting the boat and getting the equipment, and having got a clue about rowing, let alone what kind of boat we needed, and all the other bits of equipment and how they worked, and navigation and all of those things. So it was much more complicated, and I honestly don't think I could have done it alone. Maybe now, if I could afford it, I might be able to do it alone, but I couldn't have done it without Di and Elaine. We really did work as a team, and we all had our own knowledge and skills and pooled together. That's what made it work. because I wouldn't have been able to do it on my own. You know, Di was she'd previously been sailing, so she had confidence at sea. Elaine was, she was a very strong rower. And there were times through that preparation period where I thought, well, what's my contribution here? Because I was doing the training, but you know, in order to get all the equipment together, I was really struggling to get hold of people because I was working full time, whereas the other girls were able to contact people in the daytime. It wasn't the fact that I didn't want to, I couldn't, because I didn't have a signal from work to be able to, where I work, there just isn't a signal. So that was a challenge, a barrier. So I'd have to do it outside work and at weekends. And there were lots of times that I did doubt, well, you know, where's my part in this? And I doubted whether I was giving enough to the preparation for the challenge. Apart from the you know, I was keeping on top of the training side, but there were other bits where I did doubt myself. But
looking back now, what do you recognise as being your value in those pre-preparation days?
In the pre-preparation days, I think there were times when we all took that we had moments where we all doubted ourselves. So we all were encouraging one another. So I was an encourager. I had my experience from the other challenges that I'd done. I knew how important it was in terms of preparing the food and the rest. Psychologically, I was preparing myself. I think it was only when I was on the boat that I recognised where I fitted in. And I think my experience of working in midwifery and in the nursing profession, I mean, Di had that experience as well, but I think dealing with emergencies, keeping calm and not panicking, that's where I found that it came, you know, that's where I recognised, looking back, that's where I fitted in. So so on the boat, we all had our different part to play, but I think I wasn't the skipper, Di was the skipper, but there were moments when I felt as if I was almost sort of using those leadership roles and skills to kind of just keep things going. Di got very, very tired, and I remember one morning on the boat, I remember we had a really bad night. We'd had a really bad storm. Elaine was very distressed. She'd had an oar ripped out of her hand. The gate of had broken. We couldn't fix it. It was in the middle of the night. Because of the storm, there weren't any stars, there wasn't a moon, so it was really difficult to see. And I just remember Elaine saying, it's fine, I'll steer. And it all felt kind of, it was getting a bit out of hand. And I just was very firm and said, nope, nobody's staying on the boat. We're all going inside. You know, I just felt it was right. We couldn't have managed it. And we did all go into our cabins. And I remember thinking, by the time we get up in the morning, because the daylight was about 9 o'clock, by the time we'd sorted out how we were going to prepare prepare to start again and look at the gate and fix it, there were so many things to do before we got to that point. So we had to work out where the toolkit was. We had to work out, we'd actually put a line out that night, so we had to work out how we were going to get the line in. And I remember thinking, right, I'm going to set my alarm. So we had 2 hours, because Di and I were sharing a cabin, and we had 2 hours. And I woke Di up with some breakfast and said, right, Di, we need to look at how we're going to manage this so that at 9 o'clock, when it's light, we know exactly what we're going to do. And we spent those 2 hours having our breakfast, working out how we were going to do it, because we'd never, you know, come across this challenge before. And Elaine was in the other end. So you know, it's things like that I think I kind of think ahead and prepare. So that was just one of those times really that I felt that's where my skills came into play, more on the boat probably than in the preparation.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So valuable, and it demonstrates that we all have a role to play, and sometimes these situations we find ourselves in bring out those leadership qualities, don't they, when they're when they're actually life-threatening. So if you've got a panicky or a panicky decision in the middle of the Atlantic, in the middle of a storm, then that could potentially spiral out of control. So your level-headedness enabled you all to get some sleep and to think through logically what you were going to do. So just for everybody listening to this, Poppy is the boat.
Yes.
Is she 50 foot long?
I think it's about 7 meters long. However, is that I don't know what that is.
Oh, so 7 meters would actually be around, I don't know, 21 to 25
small,
people.
yeah.
That's not 50 foot long.
No, it's a small boat, and probably a crosswise 2-3 max meters.
Yeah.
It's only small, yeah.
So 3 meters, around about 9-ish, 10-ish foot wide, with a cabin at both ends. Elaine sleeping in one end and you and Di spooning in the other end. I'm imagining.
Yeah, we actually slept head to toe, and it was about it was literally that the cabin was enough for 2 people side by side, because we had too much stuff in all our nets were where we put our stuff. And it was much better if one person was in there. So generally there was only one person sleeping at one time. But because the weather was so bad when we did our row, about not quite 2 weeks into the row, we had news that 2 boats had capsized and had to be rescued. They were really bad, catastrophic capsizes. And 2 boats had been towed back because they hadn't been able to get out of the system just outside La Gomera. And one of those was a special forces, army chap who was so experienced. So that tells you the kind of conditions that we were in. And then another very experienced sailor had to be rescued for seasickness. So we realised that the weather that we were experiencing wasn't normal, because we'd never experienced anything. We just thought, this is what we should be expecting. And then when we realised, because I hadn't heard of boats capsizing in previous races, not as many as what did in our race, we realised how bad it was. So we decided for about 3 weeks that we wouldn't row at night, that we would row in the daylight hours and we wouldn't row at night. And that was pretty tough. But I think when we had that experience, that one in particular I was talking about, we'd actually started rowing again at night. And but it was scary, very scary.
I can remember we watched you on the app. I can't remember what the app is called now, but you can see the progress of the boats, and we could tell that you weren't rowing at night, because the progress during the night was no progress at all, and during the day there was great progress. And then all of a sudden you started to make great progress when you started to row at night. So we were kind of aware of that from watching the boat on the app going across the Atlantic. So we always knew what your position was, and we as the coaching team would chat amongst ourselves and have you seen where they are this morning, and then you would put messages out, and then we'd share those around the group as well. So that was really lovely to know that you were safe and well and making great progress. You mentioned putting a line out. So there was a line out of the boat the night of that storm. What was the line? I can't quite remember what the line is for. Can you remind me?
So it's like a tow. It is a tow line, and you put it out at the back of the boat to try and stabilise the boat and to keep it going in. I think it keeps you going in one direction, but also to stabilise the boat. When this incident happened, we actually rang what's his name? I've forgotten. We rang Ian, who was kind of overseeing the race, the duty officer, and we said, asked him what should we do, because we weren't quite sure whether to put a power anchor out, and he suggested not the power anchor, but to put this line out that would keep us stable. So getting it out is difficult enough, because you have to put it over the cabin. But getting it back in was also difficult, because it could get caught up in the rudder. So we had to think about, that's what we think about in the morning. Well, how are we going to do this? And we also had a conversation with our boat builder early in the morning that day to say, this is what we're thinking about doing. What do you think? Because he was amazing too. He was so helpful, Justin. And he sort of gave us advice on what to do. So we learned all of this before we went out onto the ocean. But then when you have to do it, you know, it's like anything, unless you do it all the time, you're really not quite sure. So, but I think, we just didn't panic. These small little challenges, we just thought there's always going to be some way around them. So I think, and we were all kind of had that attitude. So it's not kind of, we can't do this, but how can we do this? Was kind of how we got through a lot of those things.
And you were happy to ask the people that knew, that could give you the advice, and then you would follow through on it, which I think in life in general is so useful, isn't it? If you're unsure, ask the question, moving on, and you get that experience nicely under your belt. So Justin was the man who created Poppy for you, and I know that he was very important to you. Yeah.
Definitely, yeah. He'd done the row back in 2005 when Jamie Cracknell and Ben Vogel did it. And so when we met him, he was so enthusiastic about just rowing oceans. He wanted to do it again. So maybe one day he will. Yeah. And he built their boat that they rowed in 2005. And it was a pure boat, which was different to a concept boat. And he explained to us what that was, because we didn't have a clue really. And he said that the boat that he would build for us would be similar to his, but tweaked, because when he rowed, he said he would write down notes on what he would do differently. And Poppy was as a result of those notes. And she was an amazing boat. I mean, she did capsize once at the end, but I think for all the crews that year, everybody, I think, capsized at least once, if not more. And we didn't capsize till the last day, which was great, really, in some ways. But I think we got to the point where we thought, no, she's not going to capsize, because she was a very stable boat.
Yes. And so you were within, I think, the last 24 hours when she capsized. There's something that stays with me in terms of your explanation of that and the description of that. You felt the water was different. Do you remember saying that?
The last week. Yeah. The last week, which was the same experience that Elaine experienced, that really scary episode. The last week, it was spooky. It was, if I was to draw a picture, it would be like kind of very dark grey, almost hands. It felt just really spooky. Like, for me, felt danger. And that's the first time in the whole trip, that last week, I felt it was dangerous. And we realised when we spoke to Justin that we were actually going over an underwater mountain. And I don't know much about this, but when there's something like that underneath you, then when there's wind as well, it just makes those waves a lot bigger. And that's why it just felt very disturbed, and we just didn't feel safe at all. So yeah, it didn't feel safe, and we just wanted to get home by that point as well.
Did you know about this underwater mountain before? Did you have like the topography of the Atlantic, or because isn't it 25 miles deep in some parts of the Atlantic? It's the biggest ocean, isn't it?
Yes, yeah. Well, we should have done if we'd have done our homework. That was probably a little bit of a homework that we missed out on doing. So we did our training for oh my goodness, we did all of our training in the February. And when we did our training, the company that helped us with the training, they gave us an idea of what would be a good route. And we kind of stuck to that route. That was based on other people's route, and we stuck to that route, but we didn't actually look at what was underneath. And I think some of that was partly the way that the wind had blown us, that we got to that point, because there were times when we wanted to go in one direction, but it was so scary because the waves were so huge, and they were coming on our side, that we almost needed to go the way the waves were wanting to push us. So that's why, our route wasn't straightforward. And that might have been one of the reasons why we ended up where we did. But the other was because we didn't actually look at it. But I think a lot of people did come over that area.
Yeah.
And then you get to the Caribbean shelf, which is also very similar. It's shallower, and that's where we capsized in the end, over that, just as we were coming into the Caribbean shelf. So
wow,
yeah.
Wow. And capsizing in a boat like Poppy, let's say she's 25 feet long, 10 feet wide, that's in terms of the size and the physicalness of Poppy, although she's tiny on the Atlantic Ocean, she's very big, and heavy and solid. What was that like to capsize? Was it in a storm, actually?
It was, we didn't have kind of rain, but the waves were huge, absolutely huge. We were, I describe it like hills, so hills of water, mounds of water. And as we were going down one hill and then up, rowing up the other, you could see these other sort of mounds of water above us crashing in different areas in the distance. When you got to the top, you had this wonderful view of the sea just kind of breaking all over the place. And then the one wave that did take us over, we literally climbed it, and it was almost vertical. So before it even crashed, Elaine was behind me. We both said we knew that was it, because it almost felt like we were going to just tip back.
Yeah.
But actually what happened was the wave broke, and we were just covered in this foamy, as you do and it just completely consumed us. And the next thing I just remember, and I described this, and that's why it was in the play, it was just like being a ragdoll underneath, on my back, underneath the water. And it was as calm as ever. And there was no panic at all, calm. And I just remember my arms flailing around because I couldn't do anything. And then I remember this force and coming back up, and the pressure on my chest, because obviously the boat was righting itself and coming up, and I was, obviously the water was coming this way, and I just kind of went pop, and it felt quite a long time, but it probably wasn't very long at all. But that's just what I remember. And then when we came up, we realised that what had happened. We'd got broken oars everywhere. The boat was full of water. Elaine had got some really nasty injuries and very distressed. And it was very, thinking about it now, we were both really shaken. And so we kind of calmed ourselves down and looked at the injuries as what we got, and looked at where we were, and we started to kind of put things right. In the meantime, we'd spoken to Di, because that was the other thing. Di was in the cabin, and I realised when we kind of got our head together that Di hadn't come out of the cabin, and I thought, my goodness, she might have hurt herself, because inside the cabin there were these ridges along the side of the boat that I'd already nearly hit when we almost capsized once before. When Di and I were in the boat to get in the cabin together, we got hit by this massive wave, and I literally got lifted up and flung across the inside of the cabin, and there was a ridge. I'd hit my head, but I'd missed it, and I thought, my goodness, she's unconscious. I was banging on the cabin saying, Di, come out. Anyway, she came out, and we kind of made sure she was fine, and she was sorting out the cabin. We were on deck trying to sort out the deck, and then blow me, it just caught us by surprise. We were back in the water, capsizing again, and that time I got completely thrown from the boat, but I was attached with a harness, and I had to swim to get back in. So yeah, it was a scary time. Yeah, it was.
Gosh. So when you capsized the first time, you said that you felt really calm. So your arms were flailing, but you felt really calm. What do you think that was?
I don't know. It was, I couldn't do anything. I couldn't do anything at all. I was just, I wasn't in control, but I didn't have any. I don't know how Elaine felt about it now, thinking about it, but certainly I didn't have any anxiety, which surprised me. In that circumstance, you'd think, oh, you'd want to, but I didn't feel fear at all. Yeah. I felt fear when I went over the second time, because I was in the sea, and I'm quite frightened of the deep water and frightened of the sharks. So I did panic then, because I just wanted to get back in the boat, and your adrenaline pumps in and you just get back in the boat as fast as you can. But no, that first time, it was very peaceful. Yeah.
Amazing. Were there sharks around? Did you see sharks?
We didn't see lots of them, but I did see one early morning, and I was on my own, and it was only a small one. So whether there was a larger one somewhere else, it looked like a baby, and I was trying to shout "die" quietly because I didn't want the shark to know I was there. Die, really terrified. There's a shark, there's a shark. By the time she got out, she didn't see it, and then she was saying, "You sure it was a shark?" And I'm positive it was a shark. So I was the only one who saw it, but yeah, I'm pretty sure it was a shark. Having said that, you know, your mind does play tricks on you, and we were all tired, so who knows, but I am 99% sure it was a shark.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Lots of flying fish, I understand, and
No.
some dolphins.
Yes, lots of flying fish, and we saw some beautiful turtles. One came right up to the boat, managed to get a photograph of that one, which was lovely. We did see whales, very fleeting glimpses of them, because again, I think the sea was so rough the whole time that actually I think they were under the water. So when we did see them, it was really thrilling. And then the night after my birthday, I think we told you the story of the dolphins around the boat.
Yeah, please share that, because that's a beautiful story.
It really was amazing. So my birthday's on the 30th of January, and we'd started by that time. We were rowing at night, and I would go off at about 11 o'clock and come back on at 1 o'clock. No, sorry, I would go off at 1 o'clock, and Elaine would come in back on deck. Di and I would do 2 hours on, 2 hours off throughout the day, and Elaine would tend to do about 4 or 5 hours on and 4 or 5 hours off, because she's a really strong rower, and she preferred that because she could get some downtime. And also, unfortunately, I'm sort of going off at a tangent here, but she had her own difficulties in the way that her cabin door opened, the way that the sea came in, so she was constantly getting soaked. So it meant that she could dry off and get warm, was one of the other reasons. So she came out at 1 o'clock. But the morning of my birthday, so wind back even further to 6 o'clock when I went on, it was pouring down with rain, and I was really miserable. And I thought, my birthday. And we'd had odd glimpses of sunshine, but it really did just rain and rain and rain. And we were in our waterproofs. And of course, when you go into a small cabin, you've got to take those in with you. So everything else gets wet, covered in seawater, and it gets prickly because the salt crystals can scratch your skin, and that's horrible. And then when I went back out, it was still raining again. And then when I came back in, it was still wet and cold. And then I went back out again about 4 in the afternoon. And there was a little glimpse of sun breaking through. And I thought, great, you know. So I kind of said a little prayer and said, thank you. Because I think I'd said a prayer earlier on in the day, thinking, you know, it's about time some sunshine came out. And it did. So then I remember thinking, well, it'd be really nice if perhaps we saw some dolphins or something, wildlife, because we hadn't seen an awful lot because of the weather. And it was a sort of flippant idea. And so because then I'd come back in and we'd have tea and somebody else would be on the oars. And then like I said, I'd go back out and then come back in at 1 o'clock in the morning. And it had started to get better weather. So the sea had started to calm down, and I can honestly say I can't think there wasn't more than 5 days where the sea was calm, because I started off with 3 days. I might be able to think of four, 5, but so this was one of those times. And I went off the oars at 1 o'clock, and I remember saying to Elaine, if you see anything, you know, make sure you wake us up, because I wouldn't say that normally, but I don't know what it was. I just happened to say it. Yeah. And then at 3 o'clock in the morning, I heard Elaine. She wasn't saying anything, or she was just so excited. I could hear some noise outside, just like this, excited on the oars. And I sort of nudged Di, because I don't know, we both heard it. And I said, what's that? And we had a little peek outside of the cabin. And like I said, it was really still. And we could see, she was excited because she could see something around the boat. And as we opened up the cabin door, it had become so calm. There were no clouds. There was this beautiful moon, and it was the super moon. There were stars, which were just absolutely amazing in the middle of the ocean. I cannot describe them. All I can say is they were just spectacular. the whole place was lit up, so you could see the moon reflecting onto the sea and our boat, and then you could see these dolphins just sort of dancing around the boat, and it was just absolutely magical. So it made up for the horrible birthday weather, because that morning was just amazing. It really was. And then to top it all, they eventually kind of they danced around, and then they drifted, and they went off, and we kind of were so excited, and we were all chatting, and then I went back in the cabin, and then when I came back out later, Elaine had gone back in, she'd done her shift. Elaine had put some lovely fairy lights around the cabin door, which I hadn't noticed until I actually sat in the rowing seat. She'd put fairy lights around the cabin door, and then on the cabin it had got happy birthday, something like sent Sharon of the 7th of the seas or something like that on the door, and it was really nice. It kind of was a very, very special birthday.
Absolutely wonderful.
Yeah.
And I'm sure those dolphins knew what they were doing, and they got the timing right. How
they
fantastic.
did. Yeah.
So Sharon, food was important. We knew food was important from the coaching that we'd done with you beforehand. We knew that you had to eat something like 4,000 calories. You've explained your the food issue on your cycling from Land's End to John O'Groats. And something similar happened, didn't it, in the Atlantic as well? Would you like to share that with us?
Yeah. So when we set out about 48 hours into the row, we were all really, really suffering with seasickness. And from our training, we knew that, things that would make it worse would be not eating, tiredness, dehydration, alcohol. Well, there wasn't any of that. And so to try and get over the seasickness, you have to kind of eliminate those things. Well, the tiredness wasn't going to go away, but we could help ourselves by eating. So we tried. We were all trying to do our own thing, eating wise, just eating what we could. But before my eyes, Di and Elaine were both very slim anyway when we went onto the boat, and in preparation we were trying to gain. We were advised to gain 2 stone, because that's likely what we would lose in the row. And Di and Elaine did put on a little bit of weight, but not a lot. I stuck to my guns. I've always been quite overweight, so I didn't want to put any on. I had enough to lose, so I just mainly did lots of strength and training in that respect. But on the boat, both of them were just disappearing before my eyes. I was so worried about them. And both being sick, and I started to feel a little bit better about day 4 or 5. So I was eating dry biscuits and things that you fancy, and it's usually something dry, oat cakes, those kind of things. And we'd have a check-in with the duty officer, and I remember the one day saying, I'm really worried because Elaine is still being sick and she's not eating very much, and Di is being sick, she can't keep anything down. And he said, right, how are you? And I said, well, I'm feeling better. He said, right, you need to take charge of the food. So from that day forward, I started being the bully, if you like, saying, right, we've got to eat. And as hard as it was to eat, because when you're feeling seasick, anyone who's had sickness will know, if you're trying to focus on doing something and focus, it makes you feel worse. So to make some food was hard enough because you had to find the food, and that was difficult enough because you felt ill. Then you had to, boil the water. And those little things are so difficult when you're feeling sick and they're trying to focus. So we made 1 packet of food up that we ended up eating in our cups, because we only had cups. So I'd dish it out to cups and we would eat that. But even so, Di wasn't keeping it down. She was constantly being sick. And Elaine was saying, I'm fine, I don't need it. And I was getting really worried more about Elaine, because I could keep an eye tight because she was in the cabin with me. With Di, she would eat the food, but she'd just be sick. As soon as she got into the cabin at night, she would be sick. And to try and alleviate some of that sickness, I would lay out her bedding so that she literally had to get in, sit down in the cabin, take her top off, and just move gently back into the bed so that she could lie down and not do too much within the cabin, because that's where she felt more sick.
Right.
And I'd be lying there with fingers crossed thinking, is this going to work? And then she'd say, no, no, no. And she'd have to get up, we'd have to open the cabin, and then she'd be sick. So this was
gosh,
night after night. And like I said, Di was just becoming skin and bone. And Elaine wasn't eating anything at all. She was saying she was fine. So I got quite stressed about that. Actually, this is where your training came in, your coaching came in, because I remember becoming up as quite empathic, having the empathy and too much of it. And I remember you saying that wasn't always a good thing. And I forget what how the conversation went, but I remember you saying you have to just let it go, something like that. And that's what was happening in this case. I was getting so wrapped up in my concerns and worry about Elaine that it was starting to get me quite upset, and it was real anxiety for me. And in the end, I just had to. I remember you saying those words to me, and thinking, I just have to let it go, because you said we all have the resources to deal with those things, something along those lines. And I had to sort of think, no, this is something that Elaine has got to deal with. I can only do so much, offer the food. This is something that Elaine's got to deal with. So I kind of, that was brilliant. That that bit of coaching, I just remember, really helped me with that situation. But so in terms of the food, I continued to make food, and eventually we managed to have a bit in the morning, a bit at lunchtime, and a bit in the evening, and we probably would share one packet when we should have been having one each.
Yeah.
And then we moved on to having a bit more, and I still get the resistance, because particularly Elaine, who didn't want to eat, I'd say, no, we've got to try a bit more, we've got to have more calories. I'd look on the calories and say, no, look, we've got to have more than this. So I was the one who kind of took control of the food and the eating. So we ended up eating like you would at home, really, sort of breakfast, lunch, evening meal, out of packets. And then we started enjoying our food a bit more, and kind of make believe that we had some Merlot that we pass around, and sprinkle a little Parmesan on whatever it was we were having. And we just used to have a bit of fun, and we'd have cocktail hour in the afternoon, which was basically I'd make up an electrolyte drink, and we might have some olives or some jelly babies, and we'd just pretend we were having cocktails, and it was we just made the best of what we had, really, and some really good fun times.
Fantastic. Yeah. And that's 60 days that you were with Elaine and Di on those very, very close confined areas. So having those special moments every afternoon, cocktail hour, would be wonderful, because that would be like relief, wouldn't it, from the procedures that you were going through every day. Sharon, I remember being shocked to hear that there were two issues going on for you, and the first was that you didn't like rowing, and the second was that you were terrified of the ocean. And when you think that you were taking that 21 to 25 foot boat across 3,000 miles across the deepest and biggest ocean in the world, and you don't even like rowing, what was that like? How did you do that? How did you get motivated to do that challenge and keep yourself motivated and fear-free? How did that work?
So the coaching helped, because again, we did an exercise where we looked at the fears that we had, and we kind of looked at the real solid boat that we had in Poppy, and all of those other safety issues that we had with us. So Poppy was a very robust boat. If we stayed hooked onto the boat, then wherever Poppy went, we went, basically. If she capsized, she would right herself. So we knew all of these things. So those things, we knew that she was a solid boat. So that gave us, gave me the confidence. There were still times during those first few weeks where the waves and the sea from inside the cabin, like I said, we slept at night. The noise was incredible, and the sound, it sounded like the boat was breaking. And I genuinely thought on a few occasions that we would wake up in the morning and we would open the cabin door and Elaine would be somewhere else, that we'd be two bits of cabin floating in the ocean, because it was like hearing a lorry or train just hurtling towards us, and sometimes it would hit us and sometimes it wouldn't. And when it did hit us, it would be like a knockdown, and the boat would just be, you know, hit, and we'd bend over. That's when one of those occasions when I got flung across the boat inside the cabin. So the boat was so secure. In terms of the rowing, I really didn't like the rowing machine, and I hardly used it in my training at all. I trained, my training was about strength. We had a great coach, a sports coach that helped us with our weights and that kind of training. And we didn't, I personally didn't get any repetitive strain. Di and I think Elaine may have been similar. We did have a little bit of issues with our wrists, but I thought I'd have more in my shoulders. But rowing the ocean was nothing like rowing a rowing machine or even rowing the river. There were times when it was just so exhilarating, when there were waves going in your direction and you could see the waves coming towards you. It was, I called it dancing with the waves. It was just amazing. It was just lovely. You know, it just gives me tingles now, that the being in the middle of the ocean and just moving with the waves and then pushing you along was amazing. So it was painful. I had a lot of discomfort and pain in terms of my I think it was the fact that I was losing muscle, because you don't use your bottom muscles and either the tops of your legs, and I was getting incredible pain in my buttocks. And when I got off the boat at the other end in Antigua, I had no buttocks at all, and I'm sure it was that muscle wasting. And occasionally I'd have to stand up, you know, just to kind of move my bottom around a bit. But the other girls didn't. And I mean, if you've met me, I've got quite a large bottom, so I'm sure it was the muscle wastage that was causing the problem. So there was discomfort there. But in terms of rowing, it was, you know, it was kind of something that you just got into the rhythm and you did. And also you didn't tend to row with 2 oars. You tended to row with 1 oar, because you would be kind of trying to keep your direction, and usually the wind was blowing in one way, right. So you would possibly be rowing, you know, yeah. So it wasn't like rowing on a river. It was very, very different. Yeah. So, did I answer both of those questions? No,
yeah, absolutely, both of those questions, because when Jane and I were both in the gym and both hated the rowing machine, like you just described, and we you know, as coaches, we don't project our own dislikes or fears on our coachees, and we were very, very careful not to say, for God's sake, what are you doing this for? How can you possibly row 3,000 miles? Because we hated the rowing machine. So it sounds like it was a very, very different experience. Yeah. And also the challenge is something that's very motivating to you. Yeah. So when you work with the challenge, are you working towards the enjoyment of the process, or the enjoyment of the achievement when you've completed the challenge? How does a challenge manifest itself to you?
Looking back, I think it's all of it. I love preparing for it. I love the experiences that we get when we do these things. You know, the going out for different rides when we were training for London to Paris, and then meeting different people, and the experiences of training for the Atlantic. We got, I mean, yeah, I ought to write a book, really. I know Di's written, there's so many experiences we had. You know, the first time that we ever put Poppy into the lake, and none of us knew how to launch a boat, so we did it using information from YouTube. Literally, how do you launch a boat? And then, you know, well, you do this, number 1, number 2. So there was a lot of that. And then we, like I said, we had the experiences of rowing in different places, on lakes, on reservoirs, rivers, and then we did Ibiza to Barcelona, which was just amazing. My husband enjoyed that experience as well, because although he wasn't rowing, he was coming out on his motorbike, and he'd come and visit us in the places that we were rowing, and he'd meet new people, and we met so many different people and learned so much about things I never knew about. I probably won't use again, but it's the whole process. Yeah, it's the whole process for me, not just the getting there.
Fantastic,
Yeah.
absolutely fantastic. Sharon, how did you raise the money for this? So it would have been a considerable, I think Poppy herself was about £50,000, wasn't she?
Yeah, yeah.
How did you raise the money for this whole adventure?
We did a lot of fundraising. We had we had a web page, Facebook page, social media. We used a lot of. We tried to get sponsors, and we did get some sponsors. But ultimately, I think we all were determined we were going to do it. So there was a point at which we had to think we either put our own money in or we don't do it at all.
Yeah.
And there was no question that we just did that. We thought we would get quite a lot of it back, because we thought the sponsorship would come in terms of helping us do the race. I think we weren't very good at that side of things, if I'm honest, because I think there's a skill, and there's skills that you can use for, some people know how to do it. Some people have done it and raised incredible amounts of money for their charities, as well as having their being sponsored for doing the trip. We were really pleased. We raised just under 40,000 for our charities.
Wow.
But we did have to spend a lot ourselves on the actual trip. But it wasn't. There's no regrets from where I am. From my perspective, it was an amazing experience, and you don't know what's around the corner. So I kind of just, I loved it, and looking for something else to do now.
Yeah.
There's always something else to try, isn't there?
Yeah, well, there obviously is.
Yeah.
Definitely. And Sharon, your charity was very dear to your heart, wasn't it? Because of your friend. Could you share
Yes.
with us?
Yeah, so being a nurse, I knew a lot about various medical conditions, but I never fully understood or knew what motor neuron disease was until my friend Helen had it. And just somebody who was fit and well like myself, and then suddenly just her, the things that she loved, she really did. She loved life. She loved walking. She liked the simple pleasures as well, going down to the local National Trust, Attingham Park. Enjoyed, the beautiful snowdrops, and and she shared that with her grandchildren, and she was just a lovely lady. And to have those simple things taken away from her, eventually not being able to walk, and not being able to eat and taste and swallow, and the way she couldn't communicate, it was just tragic. Anyone else who's got family members or friends, it's tragic. So it had to be that charity for me. It was normally I would go for things because I have so many friends who've suffered with breast cancer and cancer, but this was something that I hadn't heard a lot about, and I thought, no, I really want the money to go to MND. So yeah, and sadly, she lost her fight, a battle with MND. Just before that Christmas. We were in the middle of the Atlantic, so that was. But she was really chuffed and pleased that, and she, in her way, because she couldn't communicate very well, she was just delighted that we were doing it. So yeah, so I had a photograph of her and another friend actually who had also died earlier on in the year. Were both very inspirational in terms of the way that they managed their illness. They both had such a positive outlook on life, and that they suffered such a lot. So both of their photographs were in the cabin on the wall. And one of them was a friend who had, she'd come down to see Poppy, and she'd managed to climb into the boat and look through the end of the cabin window, and I'd taken a photograph of her, and she looked so happy, and yet she was so poorly just to get on the boat. But she's determined, because she loved boats, that her and her friends used to go on various boat trips, and they'd go on barges, and she said, Sharon, I would love to do something like that. And she actually sent me a lovely message when she knew that she hadn't got very long to live, saying, I'm not going to be able to watch you and follow you, but I'll be watching you from above, So that was my another friend, Helen. But Helen, you know, like I said, I saw her the day before we left, and I kind of knew that I wouldn't see her when I came back. But both of them, they just handled their illness in such a courageous way, very strong, very positive, which I don't know whether I would be in those circumstances, but you don't know until you're there, do you? But very inspirational ladies, yeah.
And they kept you going. They were your inspiration. Absolutely. As you were rowing across.
Yeah, definitely. Along with all the messages. Again, I haven't mentioned that at all, but the messages that came through, those little short messages that you could get on a text, that came through. There were so many that didn't get to us.
Yeah.
And then the messages that were on the Facebook page, and I'd ring my daughter and she'd be in tears because she'd be trying to tell me what was on them, you know, because it was a very emotional journey, ups and downs, lots of tears, lots of singing. But those words of encouragement and some of the cards that I opened along the way, the knowing that people were rooting for us, was so lovely. You just felt that warmth and support around us that from a distance we knew, and that was really, really lovely.
You did have an awful lot of support from people that we knew about, and I'm guessing other people that were giving you support that weren't necessarily on Facebook. And I think I tried to send a message by that SMS process pretty much every day, and just hoping that you got them, knowing that you probably wouldn't, but hoping that you got them, or you got the energy that was behind them. So they were willing you across, absolutely willing you across. When you got to the other side, when you arrived in Antigua, what was that like? You just had that a couple of capsizes, which were quite catastrophic, really. You were so close. And then what was it like to have gone from almost disaster to the finish line?
There was a huge sense of relief. And when we got on to land, we were very wobbly, but just being able to hug our family was lovely. People are probably feeling a little bit like that now in these times. You know, that first hug when you haven't seen your family members for a long time it's just lovely. And feeling safe, and so much appreciation for them being there. And it was lovely because my son was a surprise, although I had figured out he was going to be there. But it just having them there was so nice. And there were strangers there that had come out to welcome us in, and we had gifts. People had brought us a sort of half a bottle of squash and a piece of cake and things they brought from their own home. They just wanted us to have as sort of welcome gifts to Antigua, and it was just so. And we had some alcohol, and it was just lovely. We didn't know them, and yet they'd obviously been following us. It was a lovely welcome, really lovely welcome.
I love the notion of someone giving you a gift of a half a bottle of squash. How fantastic is that?
That's exactly it. Yeah, it was, because you knew that they'd wanted to bring something. They didn't need to bring anything, but they wanted to bring something. But actually, that was really, really special, because it was something that we needed. We did need refreshments and things when we arrived, and it was lovely. Yeah, the gifts that we had. You knew that people had really put some thought into it. It was just amazing.
And you got a lot of support. I remember when you came in, I can't remember who the compere was, but she was sort of screaming. She was very, very emotional that you three had arrived in Antigua, and I think it had great meaning for her, but I can't remember who she is. Do you know who I'm talking about? The lady from the Talisker. Anyway, she was the one who was doing the live broadcast as you arrived in Antigua, so that was really emotional, and just incredible. And Jane Travis, actually, although I wasn't there for you, she was there for the arrival of some of the rowers the year after. So that would never have been on her map had we not coached you. So that was really quite something. The story doesn't end there, though, Sharon, does it? Because when you arrived back home, you had a little disaster waiting for you. What
Yeah.
was about the disaster, and gosh, and how are you now?
So so on the way back from Gatwick, it was really snowy and cold. I'd had to buy a sweatshirt because hadn't got any warm clothes, and I was in my sandals. So I was coming home in the car, and I knew that they were probably going to have a welcome party, which was a bit embarrassing because I'm not used to that. It seemed a bit strange, but I wasn't going to get involved. Then I got a phone call on the way back. I was in the car, and it was my daughter Ginny, and she said, "Mum," she said, "I've got some bad news." And I said, "What?" She said, "You've had a leak, a water leak, and you've got a flood." And I said, "Oh, okay, no worries, that's fine." Thinking it wouldn't be too bad, we could go back and live in the house, that'll be fine. And then she started to describe it, and I thought, oh, this sounds quite bad. So on the way back, I was trying to show her where the insurance paperwork was, so we could tell the insurance. At one point, I thought, did I actually pay my insurance? But
Oh
I had, thankfully, because I was couldn't find. I had to go back through my credit card statements to find out who I'd paid my insurance to find out who was covered with it. It was just, it was way back. So yeah, we were covered. And when we got back, we had this lovely reception, welcome home. And everyone was outside. Like I said, it was really snowy, and my neighbour had bought Wellington boots out, so I could put her Wellington boots on because I'd got sandals on. And then when everybody had kind of gone home, I went into the house, and it was terrible. The smell was horrible, and we'd had it was a burst pipe in the attic into our tank. But so we always worried about this big tank in the attic. But it was a pipe that was going into the tank, and it had come through into the bedroom, into the bathroom. So 80% of the house had completely just been wrecked. So we couldn't go in the house. I thought we might be able to live in the house, but the smell was really bad. So we went to live with Ginny for a couple of weeks. My daughter, thankfully, they got room for us. So we're living out a suitcase for a couple of weeks, and then I was due to go back to work a month after I arrived home. So with that in mind, I needed to find us somewhere to live. So with 2 dogs, because not everybody likes to let a house out with 2 dogs.
Yeah.
But we was again so fortunate because we happened to come across a house that was brand new. So we didn't think we'd have a chance of in the countryside. Accepted dogs on a short-term let, which again, they're all difficult. So we moved out to a little village called Roddington, which is about 8 miles away. And we felt like we were on holiday. Actually, we treated it in a positive way. We just thought, we're here, we'll make the best of it. And we had Christmas there. So we were there almost a year, and then we moved back end of January. I forgot what year we're in now, whichever year it was. And we're still unpacking boxes, but we've got most of them unpacked now. So yes, we're back in. And we are so lucky because the insurance has paid a lot of our repairs, and we've got a new kitchen which I never would have been able to afford to have had. So we've again, it's weird, isn't it, how these things turned out. The silver lining is that yes, it was disruptive, and yes, it was quite stressful looking back, but we're just very lucky to have our home back and yes, be settled. Fantastic. Very fortunate.
So, and it's an attitude of mind, Sharon, isn't it? Everything that you have said to us today is about looking upon the challenges, setting yourself a challenge, aiming to meet that challenge, enjoying it as much as you can, and knowing that the stuff's going to come up and it's going to further challenge you. So finding a way of resolving all of those. So coming home in the snow to a home that is full of water when you've left it all behind in the Atlantic. Must have been again quite a shock, and the way that you've reframed it is just it's just who you are, that positive can-do attitude no matter what life throws at you. Brilliant. Sharon, thank you so much for spending time with me this morning. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and I know everybody listening to this will be inspired by everything you have done, and I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for asking me. It's been fun catching up again. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Take care.
Oh, bye-bye. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.